Hello, everybody. Good morning. Thank you for coming. This is going to be quite a emotional and complicated day, but at the end of the day, perhaps not that complicated. Anyway, welcome. I'm Lawrence Weschler. I'm the director of the New York Institute for the Humanities, and I'm glad to have you here. As you know, today we're talking about longevity, the quality of life, and the coming generational smash-up. As you know, you all have these programs, so I don't give long introductions to people we're talking to. But in this case, Heather Waters, who we're going to hear from in a second, deserves a special introduction because she's ordinarily on that side of things. She's a regular participant in these, attender of these events. And not that long ago, she was at one of these events. She basically came up to me and said, you know, we should really have a discussion of blah, blah, blah. So whatever you feel about this event, it's all her fault. But Heather, I mean, we should also say that you are currently working with the NYU College of Nursing and
Yes.
and ironically with NICHE, the Nurses Improving Care of Healthsystem Elders. We'll hear from other people there today as well. But why don't you start by just telling me the story that you were telling me several months ago and why you thought this would be an interesting thing to talk about?
Well, both my parents, died on life support. Sorry, this is like a little upsetting for me, so. I'm trying to figure out a way to say this and not get upset, so I will continue to try to do that, so. And you know, when you're going through it, you're going through it, and that's it. You're just reacting to what you're being told and what's happening. None of us, I have 6 brothers, we're 6 kids, so my parents were lucky to have that support in a sense. And because of all the information, you need a lot of people kind of processing it and learning about it as you're going through it, which is not a very good way to do it. That's why I'm here, to try to tell you to not actually do that, try to understand these things before you're unhealthy, because I think it's actually really good to have a sense of what you want to do. So that's my
It started
mission.
with your mother, right?
Yes.
And what happened?
Well, my mother was, she got cancer, and she got diagnosed at the end of the cancer. So it went very quickly. And she ended up having surgery, and there was a lot of controversy about whether or not she should have the surgery. And one thing that actually I do want to also share with you that might be helpful if you're in a hospital situation is that they give you like a doctor representing like every organ. So they come in and they say, like the liver, I don't remember, actually I don't remember anything, and I'm not giving you any kind of medical information that's accurate, so that's a disclaimer. But as far as, they do go up and they tell you, like, I'm the liver doctor, and the liver we recommend the surgery because this will be good for the liver, And then there was like definitely one doctor, that I think it was pretty much the heart doctor, who said, don't do the surgery, she's not going to make it. So like, and the same thing happened with my father.
So by the way, you were saying before that you have 5 separate doctors. They come in separately.
Yeah, they come in
talking
separately.
to 6 kids.
Yes,
and
the person who's sitting there.
And the person is right there in the room, and you're being asked to make all these decisions. But
Yes.
one of the things that you were saying to me before was that you felt that it would be nice if those 5 doctors would talk to each other and maybe,
Yeah, I got the idea
talk
of a
about
hand.
the patient and not about the, right.
Like if you have a hand, and these are all the doctors, and one of the doctors says, you're going to die, and then you're already really sick with another disease, I think you're probably going to die. And I think there's something a little bit distracting about having 5 doctors all coming in, and some saying, for this particular organ, you should do the surgery, but if the heart's going to be the one that, if you're going to die, it doesn't matter if the liver's going to survive, in other words. So that's just something I would think about.
So moving forward, your mother died. There's some issues there also, but we'll talk about them in the context of your father. So then your father, what happened with your father?
Well, my father was actually more grueling in the sense that, well, my mother ended up going on a ventilator, and then she ended up having a trach. No, she didn't have the trach, but she was offered a trach, which, that's the other really disturbing part for me. That's why I'm here also, is because I just thought, like, why was this woman who was so close to death being offered a trach? And then, my father, and then there's this grieving man, they were together since they were like 16, and now they're in their 70s. you know, he doesn't want her to go, so he's obviously wanting to have her here in any way he possibly can, so it's very emotional for him. And I do question if you even ask people in that situation when someone is dying, like it wasn't going to help her, she wasn't going to recover. She wasn't going to become conscious, like nothing was going to be good for this except an emotional connection that people want to keep, which is really hard and sad to watch people having to make those decisions. So then my father, you know, actually he seemed very much like he wanted to live. We were a little worried that he would want to die too after my mother died. But he actually really rallied, and it was very sweet to watch him wanting to stay alive, you know. But he ended up having a very big heart attack about a year later, and he ended up being in the hospital for 3 days by himself, unfortunately, without anyone knowing. And then he had very serious CPR, very serious, CPR serious, but like I think it was like a lot of CPR. Like I don't know.
One of the things we're going to talk about CPR, especially on elder people, is it's extremely violent.
Right.
And chances are you're breaking bones and all kinds of other things going on. And then what else you were saying?
Well, see, I didn't even know that through this whole process. I thought CPR was something that was actually, didn't have all that. I was unaware of like the effects of actually CPR. So that's something that people should actually probably think about, that CPR is actually really harmful for your body, or can be. So then he was on a ventilator, you know, again, after my mother was on a ventilator, my father was on a ventilator. And then... Which
is also harmful.
Yeah, really harmful. Which also we didn't, you just look at them and you don't know what's going on. It's very sad to see this happen, but you don't know. You don't know the actual damage that's happening. And I don't think I will ever really know unless I become a doctor, which I don't expect, or a nurse, which I don't expect to be doing. So anyways, so then he ended up being offered a trach, and we actually did it because we thought he might recover, and there was a sense that maybe he would recover. He was fully alert, which is also why we decided to do it, because it's very, and obviously, you know, you don't want your fully alert father to be put to sleep or something, you know, if he seems like he's healthy and of mind. So that was a big deal. And then there was a lot of talk that he would recover, and then yet there's always this one doctor, you know, months later. I'm sorry not to be. I actually have a great respect for doctors. I don't mean that I don't. I just think this whole system needs to be reevaluated. But you know, then there's like my sister Julie emailing us that some doctor told her that, you know, I'm sorry, but this is not gonna work. You know, like you know, after my father had the trach, and then we were all like, well, no one said that yet. Like, why are you suddenly saying that? And you know, it was just like, wow, okay. Well, then we just ignored him because, you know, we started this process.
The trach, by the way, is a insertion of a tube through the throat, basically, or
yeah.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's funny. I must have blocked it all out because I don't remember that much about this. So, yeah.
And he persisted for how long?
For a long time, it was a very high and low kind of situation, high emotions, low emotions, like thinking maybe every little thing, oh my God, he's getting better, but then he actually wasn't getting better at all. He didn't improve one single bit. You know, except he did maintain his mental facility, and you know, this is the part where I've been laboring in my mind, is that it was nice to have him alive, to say goodbye to him, to have that period. And I'm like, well, I don't exactly regret this, although it was probably incredibly hard for him. He was always very nice and protective of us, and funny and kind during the whole thing. But he got depressed at the end, and then he ended up being put to sleep, you know, again. Like what we didn't want to do, we ended up doing because nothing was working after about 9 months. So I don't know. I can't say if it was something that was helpful to him. Maybe he sat up at night and thought about his life. I don't know. But I do have thoughts, very strong thoughts, that I do not want to do any of this at all. Like, I do not want to be involved in any kind of end-of-life care. I think it's a mistake. And I don't think my parents were in the position to make that decision. I think they were the first generation that had to go through this. So I feel it's my duty, you know, to like express the thought that I do think this is an important conversation to have, that people need to think about this. And before you know, I think we should start thinking about the fact, well, you know, the Buddhists talk about like preparation for death, right? Like we should be, you know, preparing for the fact that we die, you know, almost through every stage of life on some level. And I think then, you know, and I think when I think about, well, do I really want it that my father didn't go through that? And I think maybe if you thought about the quality of conversation we would have had before he died, if we didn't have this problem, you know, if we all understood that you know, if there was a very clear idea about, you know, that dying is something that you can do naturally on some level, that the quality of conversation, maybe you would die a few years sooner, but you would have a better quality of conversation, or, you know, as far as well-being is concerned, maybe versus health even, like what is well-being? Like what do we want to do to keep our well-being? So, personally, like I said, I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to do any of that. I hope I don't end up in an accident and then I have to do it because like somebody just sticks a ventilator on me. That's another reason I'm here, because I'm trying to become public, that I don't want to be on one of those things.
Well, Heather, I mean, the reason I wanted to have Heather go first here is there are several things that I thought were really interesting. First of all, this is really complicated. And I wanted to start with a complicated case. I mean,
it is very complicated.
And the case of your father being mentally alert through this whole thing is different than with a lot of people, but makes it all the more complicated. Yeah. That's one thing. And the other thing is, that's the talk I had with her 6 months ago. You just heard it, and you can see why I thought this would be.
Yeah, this is like right up my alley. I mean, I think about this. Not everybody does. This is kind of, I write poetry, and I think about that. Right. So it's, so I think about this.
Anyway, Heather, thank you so much, and maybe Nancy, you can come. I'll stay here, but thank you.
Okay, sure. Thank you. Oh, you want this? Okay. Here we go. Here you are.
Oh no, she's good.
Oh, you're just going to stand. Do you want to take this off? Or?
No, it's okay. It's okay.
No? Okay.
We have a question.
Yeah.
Put to sleep me when
What did?
Oh, sorry. That's me not knowing any of the terminology I should be using. He was given something to die. That was, what's it called? Morphine. He was given morphine to die peacefully. He actually had a nice peaceful.
is that legal in the hospital?
Given that.
See, I'm sorry.
He probably just died because
Relieves pain. It happens all the time.
but he wasn't given it actually to die.
Oh, okay. So this is why I
That's okay,
made a
that's okay,
disclaimer in the
yeah.
beginning. I don't know how to talk about medicine at all.
Okay. Anyway, so I'm having conversations with Heather about this, and at the same time, I'm having conversations with my good friend and neighbor Nancy about what she's going through with her parents, who are right here, right?
Yes. My parents are here. Actually, they're still alive.
Let's bring this closer to you. How's that?
And so what I'm... Whoop, can you hear me? Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes. Oh, he's gonna do it here. Okay.
So I thought it was important, since my parents are still alive. My dad is 90 and my mother's 89, and I'm going through what I'm going to talk to you about literally as we speak. It seemed to me they should be here, and I should introduce you to them. That's my mother, Annette Biberman, Annette Bell Biberman, my dad.
Can you hear in the back?
No. Oh, I'm sorry. All right, I'll hold it. Is that better?
Yeah.
All right, I can do this. That's all right, I can hold this. Yeah. So I thought it was important that, this is the greatest generation. My dad was a decorated war hero. He was a scientist, and he invented the proximity fuse, which in weaponry sort of like allowed a bomb to be dropped somewhere other than right beneath the airplane. It could be dropped at a distance. He was a soldier in the South Pacific during the war, and he trained other soldiers in munitions, and he went on to be an engineer. My mom, the librarian in the public schools of Philadelphia. She's an artist, too. She painted. And they had 2 kids, me and my sister. They live in Philly, and about a year ago, they moved into assisted living. Up until that time, they were living in the house that I grew up in, a teeny little suburban ranch with no help at all, throughout their 80s. My dad was diagnosed with Alzheimer's about 14 years ago. And he went through this period of decline with my mother as his sole caregiver. And it was, it was something that we watched, from a distance, making our periodic visits, the kids and the grandkids. And my dad, was and is a very funny guy. and very smart. And so when we would visit him at home, like, Dad, how you doing? Perfect. I'm perfect. He was always perfect. And he really did say things like, it's always sunny in Philadelphia, which is where they live. He was very smart, and one of the reasons why he was so good in covering the Alzheimer's for such a long time was that he was able to make up things, you know, that seemed to fit in the conversation. So even when he looked at you, knew he recognized you, but didn't really know who you were, he would say things like, how's the mashpuka? I mean, you know, there's got to be a mashpuka, right? You don't need to know who they are and their names, but there was a mashpuka, and so, you know, you could have a conversation. And then I would say in the last couple of years, his conversations started to get what we called loopy. He would go off into the, you know, the war. You know, the war's a terrible thing. You know, we fought the Japs. We should never go to war. And, you know, that conversation, my husband Roger's out here. He can remember some of these conversations. But, you know, there were like weather loops. There were family loops. There were war loops. And then we always came back and started again. It wasn't unpleasant until it started to get really scary, which was about a year ago. And about a year ago, my dad started getting violent and, you know, tried to escape, actually did escape from the house several times. And the last escape was in the middle of the night, where he wound up in his pajamas several miles from my parents' home. And the police got him. We got called in the middle of the night. And as this was happening and the interior locks were put on the house doors and aides started to come in and provide assistance, my mother started having hip problems. And gradually, she could no longer walk. So she went at 88 years old to a hip surgeon at University of Pennsylvania Hospital, and she had 5 hip surgeries over the course of last summer, starting in the middle of July. The first was a surgery to replace her hip. The second was a surgery because the replaced hip dislocated. The third was a surgery because there was an infection. The fourth was a surgery because it dislocated again. And the fifth was a surgery to remove the hip because she'd had enough. And she said, you know, let me just stay in a wheelchair. So they did move to this assisted living facility because my mother knew she was going to be in surgery and something had to happen with my dad. So they were both in what they called the skilled nursing floor, you know, AKA nursing home, but now they call it skilled nursing. And she was recovered from these multiple surgeries, but, you know, managed to recover. My dad, meanwhile, is running around this nursing home screaming at the top of his lungs, let me out of here, let me out of here. Where are my keys? You know, I have my keys. You know, you can take me out of here, can't you? Why am I here? And this went on and on. You know, medications worked somewhat, but, you know, there was a lot of trial and error in getting something that would calm him, but not make him comatose. So Alzheimer's is a very, very, it's a very difficult illness. I don't know what else there is to say. And my dad's in end-stage Alzheimer's now. Like I said, I'm in the middle of it literally yesterday. Me and my sister did one of our many, many round trips to Philadelphia to check in on my dad, to see what my mom was doing. So I want to tell you a little bit about how he's doing. One extraordinary episode in an ER with a guy with Alzheimer's. And then, you know, I'm just going to leave it sort of suspended because that's where it is, actually. So my dad, my parents now have aides with them, first of all, 24/7. And it's pretty remarkable that they can afford it. We calculate that they're spending about $300,000 a year on their care. This is on my dad's Social Security. He had no pension. My mother's teacher's pension, her Social Security. They were very frugal. They saved maybe $1 million. and they're blowing through it right now. After my dad, sort of settled more or less in the dementia care facility of the institution where my mother, subsequently recovered from her surgeries and got her own apartment. This is a high-rise in Center City, Philly. My dad fell on his way to the bathroom, and somebody decided that this 90-year-old, seriously demented man must have a concussion as a consequence from the fall. He wasn't bleeding. He was picked right up, but they took him to the ER, and we got to the ER probably, 12 hours after we found out about it, and it was an ER in Center City, Philly. A lot of gunshot victims. There were police that were sort of stationed in this ER. My dad was, he understood what was going on in the sense of like, let me out of here. I don't want to be here. He was screaming at the top of his lungs, let me out of here. And we were screaming at the doctors to give him some pain medication, something to quell his anxiety. As it turned out, this ER, and I called my gerontologist brother-in-law in panic several times. He said, see if there's a geriatrics division. No. See if there's a palliative care division. Yes, but it's only connected to oncology. See if there's a psychiatric division. No. So there was like nobody in this hospital who could deal with my father other than doing the CAT scan and keeping him in physical restraints. His arms and legs were in physical restraints in this bed, and he was screaming at the top of his lungs, And we had to beg the doctors to sedate him. So it turns out that my dad has an advance directive. I mean, I actually have it with me, and I keep it with me pretty much all the time to remind myself.
What's an advance directive?
An advance directive is when you, when you say in a legal document, and other lawyers here can correct me to the extent I'm wrong about this, but it basically says this is what I want to happen should I get to the point when I can't make these decisions. So my dad signed one of these in 2009, knowing full well that he had Alzheimer's. And he said, if I have an end-stage medical condition, meaning resulting in my death within 6 months, hospice, we do have hospice care now, and it was determined that he did. Nothing, no life-prolonging measures of any kind. I would consider this decision to be, this condition of mentally not being there intolerable. So that's, that's what his daughters, know about what he wants. So finally, we gave this advance directive to the residents in the ER and said, he doesn't want any, really, don't do anything. They took this, they didn't have, this was like truly amazing. He was on one medication, Seroquel, which is, commonly and sometimes inappropriately used for people with Alzheimer's. It didn't come in IV form. And they determined during an admitting exam to the hospital for his concussion that he was a swallow risk, which people with end-stage Alzheimer's, and they can't swallow, they aspirate food. That's how most people with Alzheimer's die, from aspiration pneumonia. So that meant that they couldn't give him anything by mouth, and it turned out that this medication was only available in pill form. So these residents clustered together. My sister and I are saying, please give him something, anything, stick an IV in his arm. He doesn't want to be in pain. They look at his advance directive, and they interpret it to mean that giving him a sedative through his nose would violate his wishes. And so they let him sort of scream in agony and his two daughters, lawyer 1 and lawyer 2, were absolutely incapable of doing anything. It took us 4 days to get him out of this hospital. There was nothing wrong with him. The cause for his admission, this, fall, which was really nothing, it just, they would not let him out. They determined that he was a swallow risk, and so the place where he had been staying, the dementia care unit, said, well, they can't, if you're gonna discharge him as a swallow risk, we can't take him. And there he is in the hospital and screaming in, kind of, I think, one of the most appropriate things I've ever heard. I'm a prisoner in the United States of America. I'm a prisoner in the United States of America. And he just screamed at the top of his lungs. Long story short, very long story short, because it is still going on, my dad is still in end-stage Alzheimer's.
By the way, I was with you a few days after that, and you told me how much they charged you?
Oh, yes. That 4-day hospitalization was over $100,000. My mother's 5 hip surgeries, I have no idea what they cost, because it all goes through Medicare, and she does have her wonderful teachers union insurance. But, if the 4 days of nothing in a hospital was $100,000, can you imagine what 5 surgeries are? Mm-hmm. Anyway, that's basically my testimony.
And when we were first talking about this horrendous story, and now you can see I kind of wanted these 2 stories out here as the beginning of this, just because everything else I want to make clear this is happening to people all the time. It is happening right now, and many of you in the audience are having your own situations, or will. This is not a what-if situation, but a what-when situation, because we will all face situations like this. But when we were first talking about this, what we had agreed was that your daughter, who is 25, Lily, and who was going to be here but can't be here, so I'll be Lily right now, and I would get up and say, but excuse me, Mom, that's bad enough for you and the greatest generation and so forth, but what is this going to be like when we, baby boomers, are 60 years old, when we, the children of baby boomers, are 60 years old, and this incredible cohort, this huge cohort, is going to be 90 years old, and this sort of thing is going to be going on. What is going to happen to this country? And you would answer?
As I have to her and my 2 sons many times, I promise I will not put you through this. And I hope I can
keep that,
be true to that.
So anyway, we're going to get started now. Thank you so much, Nancy. That was really... So give us a minute while we do the mics, but just as you understand during this day, this is going to be a conversation that is at once personal, conversations that need to take place within families, but I would argue that it's also political, social, cultural. It's a conversation that needs to take place in this country. And it's a conversation that really, we need to find some way of being able to do this and not having the conversation strangled the minute even it begins with, death panels, So anyway, with full awareness, this is very complicated. At the same time, it is something that needs to be done, and so that's the plan for the day. So give us 2 minutes, and we're going to have a wonderful, wonderful nurse, Liz Capozzetti, and Diane Meyer, who's a doctor, and we'll continue. Just 1 second.